Welcome to the Times of Israel's daily briefing. Today is Tuesday, March 17th. I am Amanda Borschel-Dan here in Jerusalem with our military correspondent, Emanuel Fabian. Manny, thank you so much for joining me today.
Hi, Amanda.
We have a lot to discuss. We're going to talk about the targeted strikes on Iranian officials. We're going to talk about what's happening in Lebanon. And in the second half of the program, we're actually going to talk about Manny's adventures with Polymarket. So all of this and more when we're back. And we're back. I am Amanda Borschel-Dan here in our Jerusalem office with military correspondent Emanuel Fabian. Manny, we have just heard word of targeted strikes against Iranian officials today and in the past several days. So what can you tell us of the most recent headlines right now?
So we're hearing from the IDF this morning that it carried out strikes in Iran overnight against very senior Iranian officials. It's confirmed so far that one of the strikes killed the commander of the Basij paramilitary force, the repressive force that has acted against or violently suppressed the protests in Iran and responsible for killing numerous Iranian civilians. So the commander, Gholamreza Soleimani, was killed in the strike, along with his deputy and along with other top officials in the paramilitary force. The IDF says the strike targeted a tent camp that had recently been established by the Basij. And this is because Israel has been bombing their main headquarters. So in an effort to try and establish a new place of operations, ostensibly harder for Israel to track, that's where they were. They were at this tent camp. In addition, top Iranian official Ali Larijani, one of the most senior defense and security officials in Iran, was targeted as well overnight. The army is saying that it still doesn't know the results of the strike yet. It's still looking into it, meaning it's unclear if he was actually killed or not. But that's something they're looking into. And then separately from these strikes, a strike on Wednesday targeted top members of the Palestinian Islamic Jihad organization in Iran. So we're talking about Akram al-Ajuri, who's something like the second in command of the organization, or I think it's fair to just call him one of the leaders of Islamic Jihad. And he was targeted along with other officials at some sort of safe house or facility in the Tehran area. And right now the military believes he was killed in the strike, but hasn't fully confirmed this yet. So it's still working to sort of fully confirm he was indeed killed before actually announcing that it has killed him.
And all of these strikes have been conducted by the Israeli Air Force alone or in conjunction with the U.S.?
These strikes specifically were conducted by the Israeli Air Force. There may have been others overnight with the U.S. that the U.S. conducted as well. I'm not sure yet. We haven't seen any announcement from the U.S. as of now, but right now this is what we know from the Israeli military.
All of this indicates to me, at least, that our intelligence is extremely sound. Would you agree with that assessment, Manny?
I think Israel is, when it comes to these sort of strikes, I think Israel's intelligence is quite exceptional and quite scary even, I would say. Just to think back to the opening strikes of this war on February 28th, Israel killed Ali Khamenei, who was probably the most secured person in the Middle East, considering all the threats against him. And if you think the fact that the US was building up its forces in the Middle East and there were threats against him, and it wasn't a secret that he was a target, and yet Israel still managed to find him and locate him and kill him along with around 40 other top Iranian officials that morning. So I think Israel's intelligence here is quite exceptional.
And as far as I'm aware, Manny, correct me if I'm wrong, but Mojtaba Khamenei, we have still not seen him since the strike. We understand that he was potentially wounded, but do you have any updates on the new supreme leader?
No, not really. We know he was injured in a strike at the beginning of the war. His exact condition is debated among various sources. Some say he's lightly wounded, some say he's been more severely hurt. But the fact is we haven't seen him, and we haven't really heard from him either. since the beginning of the war.
Right. There have been statements issued in his name, but there's been no proof of life as far as I understand it. So, Manny, these strikes on the officials is just one aspect of what the IDF is doing in Iran. What else, what other targets is it trying to strike?
So we've seen, again, waves of strikes in Iran over the last few days. Mostly, we're kind of hearing a lot of the same thing. Israel's going for Iran's ballistic missile launches to try and reduce the amount of fire in Israel. It's still working on destroying Iran's air defenses, so it has more freedom of air activity or aerial superiority over Iran's skies. But there is a main focus now in this phase of the war on Iran's defense industries, the military industrial industries, basically, where Iran manufactures its weapons. So from what the army is saying is there's sort of all of these companies that manufacture weapons or the components for the weapons are now being systematically destroyed. So the big firms as well, the ones that are affiliated with the IRGC, of course, are being bombed, all these massive factories where Iran produces ballistic missiles, but also a small office in Tehran that manufactures a small chip that goes in a missile or goes in a drone. Those are also being targeted. So basically everything along the entire supply chain of Iran's weapons industry are all being targeted. Israel seeks to basically remove Iran's ability to produce any weapons at all. Right now, the military is saying that Iran can't produce any new ballistic missiles because of the strikes that have been conducted. That's as of now, and there's still hundreds more targets relating to Iran's military-industrial complex that Israel wants to target still, and those will be sort of in the coming weeks. And then we also understand that the later phases of the war, the next phases, although we have seen these already been targeted, are the nuclear sites. Israel's already targeted some of Iran's nuclear facilities, research facilities, development as well, and all sorts of other aspects relating to Iran's nuclear program. I do think that once Israel finishes with the defense industries, it will then move on to the larger and more significant targets of the nuclear program as well.
Right. You mentioned the missile manufacturing. There's also, of course, the attack drone manufacturing. And from what I understand, some 500 can be manufactured in a month, which is a pretty great number. And it appears that there is some kind of endless source of them. When you see how often the Arab Gulf states are being targeted by them, Israel is not necessarily feeling the brunt of this in this time, at least. In the June war, hundreds were sent out, but I believe almost none reached Israel. But the Arab Gulf states are still feeling pain from Iran, both in the drones and in the missiles. Do you have an update about this, Manny?
It's still the same. These drones are barely reaching Israel, and pretty much all of them are targeting the Gulf states. So the Israeli Air Force has reported shooting down, I think, 110 or so drones from Iran since the beginning of the war, which is almost insignificant. None of them reached Israel, or if they did, they were shot down, on the border kind of thing. In the previous war in June, more than 1,000 were fired at Israel, and all of them, except for one, reached Israel, which caused some damage. But yeah, it's really mainly targeting the Gulf states. It's not really a huge threat to Israel, these drones. The main threat is the ballistic missiles, which of course Iran still has potentially thousands, hundreds. It's very hard to say how many exactly they have left. But in terms of the launchers, the military says that it has destroyed about 70% of Iran's launchers. Is this significant? I think not really. Mainly because in the June war, Israel said it destroyed about half of Iran's launchers, and then it managed in 6 months or so to rebuild hundreds more. And from what I've been told from Israeli intelligence officials, they think that it's relatively simple for Iran to build these launchers. It's basically just a truck with a hydraulic lift on it that allows them to mount the missile. It's not a particularly complicated thing for them to do. So even if Israel destroys 90%, 100% of the launchers, if Iran is allowed to survive the regime is allowed to survive beyond this war, it's going to go back and rebuild these launches in a very short amount of time.
Right. We saw that, of course, Lahavdil, as we say, when we're comparing apples and oranges in Gaza with Hamas, that the launchers were not really the main thing that needed to be targeted. It's the missiles and the projectiles that were coming towards us.
I'll say in the short term, targeting the launchers does make a difference. We see the reduction in the missile fire in Israel, but if the war and when the war ends and Iran survives, it will just go back to rebuilding more launchers in a very short time.
There's a lot more to discuss in terms of Iran, and listeners, please check out our live blog for more updates. Now, Manny, I want to turn to Lebanon because Israel announced yesterday that there would be a targeted ground operation moving into southern Lebanon. We know that tanks have been on the ground for at least a week, but what does this targeted ground operation mean, and how does it square with the fact that so many reservists are being called up at the same time?
So, the reservists being called up and not being called up for this operation, mostly, then mainly to replace other forces on other fronts. The operation in Lebanon is basically all standing army forces right now, not reservists.
So the reservists are being called up to replace the standing forces who will be sent to southern Lebanon.
Correct.
So there is correlation here.
Yes, there is. Yes, but it's important to sort of distinguish this. But right now, if you want me to translate it into very simple terms, the IDF has pushed into South Lebanon. It's moved in by, it's hard to say exactly, but let's say a few kilometers into Lebanon. And it is conducting ground operations there. It's working to uncover Hezbollah weapon depots and facilities and to kill operatives. Of course, Hezbollah sent members of the terror group down to South Lebanon to try and confront the Israeli military. And that's where we are right now. The army has pushed in a bit more, pushed in a little deeper. It was already at the 5 posts in South Lebanon before the conflict started. Immediately after Hezbollah began attacking Israel, it pushed forward to additional posts. And now it sent forces slightly beyond that. That's really where we are right now. The army is preparing for, I would say, a much more expanded Lebanon ground operation with lots more forces and conducting something much more intensive that hasn't started yet. And I don't think we're going to see that just yet either.
Because why, Manny? Because we're waiting on diplomacy still, or
I think I would safe to say we're waiting on some sort of diplomacy. Israel's doing this in a very staged and slow manner. It's not rushing forward with the forces and just sending in thousands and thousands of troops. It's a much more limited, targeted, as the army says, targeted raids that they're conducting in specific areas. It's mainly strategic areas to try and push Hezbollah back from the border. And I say this, it's really important to note this. The army is really saying that it's creating a buffer zone between the residents of northern Israel and Hezbollah, and that's why it's pushing into South Lebanon to create this buffer, mainly to prevent direct fire, meaning anti-tank fire or other attacks or infiltration attacks from Lebanon. It is really important to stress this because Hezbollah's rocket fire will not stop with this ground operation, and I think that needs to be clearly said. Hezbollah is firing its rockets from much deeper within South Lebanon, from the Litani River and sometimes even beyond the Litani River, north of it. The missiles it fires or has fired at central Israel are not launched from the border area in South Lebanon. They're launched from deep within Lebanon. So it's really important to stress that because if Israel wants to stop the rocket fire from Lebanon, it's going to have to conquer the entire Lebanon, basically. The rocket fire is not going to stop with a ground operation 5 kilometers or 20 kilometers or even 40 kilometers into Lebanon. That's not going to stop. But the main thing that the army is stressing is preventing Hezbollah from being on the border so it can defend the northern communities from infiltration attacks, from direct fire.
Right. And in its arsenal, Hezbollah has many different types of projectiles. We've discussed this in the past. There's short range, mid range, and long range. And what they're shooting right now, do you have any idea of what it is that they're shooting at Israel for the most part now?
It's a mix of short range rockets that they're firing at the northern border communities, although most of Hezbollah's rocket fire, around 2/3 of it's actually targeting Israeli troops in South Lebanon or on the border area. Only a third actually is aimed at Israel. So those short-range rockets are being used to target Israeli troops, of course, but also the border communities and towns. It has medium-ish range rockets that can reach further, the ones that they kind of fire at Haifa or deeper within the north. And then they have these, I think it's fair to call them missiles, basically. They're not long-range missiles like Iran's ballistic missiles, but they're missiles with ranges of 150 to 200 kilometers or so. And those are the types that they fire at central Israel. They fired several times at the center. There was a strike on the satellite station outside Beit Shemesh a week or so ago. That was one of these missiles that Hezbollah has. They're manufactured or produced mainly by Iran or with Iranian knowledge, and they don't have a massive arsenal of these, as far as Israel understands. We're talking about maybe several hundred of these missiles that Iran has currently.
So just to sum up what you're stating about Lebanon, in the meantime, there's no plan, as far as we know, to conquer Lebanon. Nobody is talking about that, as far as we know. And this targeted ground operation is yet again to try and push the terrorists across the Litani River, which is what, at its farthest point, something like 10, 15 kilometers from the border with Israel. Is that right, Manny?
At the shortest point.
At its shortest. Okay, thank you for that correction. And so in the meantime, this is what we're hearing. And yet again, it will be probably most likely leading to some kind of ceasefire negotiation, and the threat will remain, but it is contained. And the idea of a onslaught on the north in terms of Hezbollah forces crossing the border, this is what the IDF is focusing on right now.
Yeah, that's correct. Israel really wants to, I think we've heard this from many Israeli officials. Israel wants to remove the threat of Hezbollah entirely if it could, and it wants to keep going. And I think it's been very clear that even when the war with Iran ends, Israel will continue to operate against Hezbollah in Lebanon. It operated against Hezbollah after the ceasefire in November. There's no reason for Israel to stop here. The question is, how far is it going to go, and will it keep going until Hezbollah doesn't exist anymore? I don't think that's particularly possible. You can't really remove every last gun and every last rocket. It's not really that possible. But Israel's also hoping that the Lebanese state will step up as well. There's been a lot of, I would say, good progress there. The Lebanese army did operate in South Lebanon. It did uncover a lot of Hezbollah sites. Not enough, Israel says, but it definitely did act. And now we're hearing a lot of voices from the Lebanese state against Hezbollah. There's been Hezbollah members who have been arrested and charged because they've basically outlawed their activities in Lebanon. Lebanon also banned Iranian sort of IRGC members from Lebanon as well. As far as we know, most of them have all left Lebanon now after Israel targeted a lot of them as well in strikes. So there is progress there, but it really remains to be seen if that's enough to really remove the threat of Hezbollah from the area. For both the threat that is basically against Israel and also against Lebanon, because Lebanon's also suffering the consequences of this.
Of course, Lebanon is suffering the consequences, and we're hearing some 800 at least have been killed since the fighting restarted. That's including combatants, I would assume. But yes, the Lebanese government, I guess, is the key at this point to quelling Hezbollah. Yet to be determined if they are actually capable of it. So, Manny, we're going to go to a short break, and then we're going to do something that every journalist, or most of the journalists, really hate, and we're going to make you the headline of our next section. And we're back. I'm Amanda Borschel-Dan here with our military correspondent, Emanuel Fabian. Manny, you had the amazing luck to be swept up into the Polymarket schemes. And we've talked about Polymarket a little bit in the past, but first of all, before we break into your saga, let's talk about what is Polymarket, where is it based, who are its owners, what's its goal?
Okay, so in very short, Polymarket is I would call it a gambling website, although they don't advertise it as such, where you can place bets on future events. Think of it like sports betting, which team wins, but take that concept and think about it. You can bet on anything. Will Donald Trump post a tweet today? Will the weather hit 40 degrees today? Will Israel strike in Iran on this specific day? And also, there was a bet which is what I got caught up in, apparently, Did Iran strike Israel on a specific day? These users could bet basically on every day whether or not Iran launched an attack against Israel. And one of my reports ended up getting caught up in the middle of this mess.
Right. So it's something that's based in New York and Manhattan, I believe. And as you said, it's used for global betting predictions. I think they call it on the website, right? They don't call it gambling or betting. They call it predictions. Like prophecy isn't dead, but okay, fine. And your report, which was something along the lines of a missile, a real full on missile struck in an open field, meaning nobody was hurt. And this is the sticking point in the actual bet that was placed. Am I correct, Manny?
Yep. So I reported on March 10th that a missile from Iran struck an open area outside Beit Shemesh. It's a city near Jerusalem, and it caused no injuries, no damage. And it was a very, very short little item on our live blog. Almost, I hate to say this, maybe kind of unimportant given the grand scheme of things in the war. Iran had fired by that point like 200 plus missiles at Israel. And, we don't report on every single missile, but in this case, there was a big explosion in the area. Rescue forces rushed to the scene because people reported hearing this big blast that shook all their windows. But within a few minutes, I was able to confirm that nobody was hurt. The missile struck around 500 meters from homes in this forested area just outside the city. And we have a short update that says there's no injuries in this attack. The missile hit an open area, and I even attached a video showing the impact, a dashcam video that I received. Somebody had filmed it, and we got it up actually very quickly to show this missile impact in an open area. Now, going back to Polymarket, the bet that that people had apparently wagered on was, did Iran strike Israel on a specific day? But the rules are very carefully worded. So the rules say that if a missile hits Israel, that's considered yes, meaning Iran did attack Israel that day. But if an intercepted missile, or if a missile is intercepted and the fragments fall down and cause damage, even if they cause damage, that's not considered an attack. And because my report says a missile struck the area, that would be considered yes. And I started getting requests from people to change it. I started getting weird emails asking me, can you change this instead of a missile impact, write that fragments fell in the area? And I was very confused as to why these people are asking me. And I got multiple emails asking me to change it. And I, decided not to because it was a bit weird. And then I started getting messages on Twitter, or X as it's called today, asking me, when are you going to update the story? And I started looking at the profiles, and I started seeing that they're all people who bet on Polymarket. And then it kind of clicked, and I found the bet and figured out basically what was going on. Is the people who had bet no were basically demanding that I change it so that they would be able to win.
Just pause for 1 second, Manny, and I just want to ask you, at this point, were you at all conflicted? Were you saying, oh, maybe I need to double check? Am I wrong? Is my reporting wrong? Did you recheck?
Yeah, so, I mean, I was going to, but then I thought, does this really matter? I mean, who cares, right? It's just another missile. I mean, we've had hundreds of them. It didn't hurt anybody. Nothing, no damage was caused. Is this something I really need to start bothering the army about and checking again and tripled? I mean, I checked with them at the time, of course, when I reported that the missiles hit an open area, that whether or not this was an actual missile. I checked briefly, yeah, it was an impact, sure, whatever, done. It was just like a very quick thing. I thought, like, I thought, is this so inconsequential? It's such a minor detail, and even if I was to change it, if I was to listen to these demands, it wouldn't matter. It doesn't change anything. It makes no difference really to anybody apart from, I guess, to these Polymarket bettors. And I mean, I chose not to change. I chose to keep it because I believe my reporting is accurate. And I had no reason to really to change it, or even to really doubt myself here. So I didn't adjust it.
Right. And of course, we have the video that was sent from a reputable person that clearly shows what happened. All right. So now, in terms of your saga, of course, they didn't leave it at Twitter, and it escalated quickly. What came next?
So yeah, it really did escalate. I started getting messages on WhatsApp from someone I do not know, basically threatening me, saying that I need to change this now because he's going to lose a lot of money, and if I don't change it, then basically he will kill me. Is the way I would translate it. He said that he would finish me. He threatened my family. He even sent personal details about my family and allegedly where I live as well. And he gave me a countdown timer saying if you don't change it within this amount of time, then here's what's going to happen to you. All sorts of threats, and you can read them in the story. I included only some of them in there. There were many, many more that it was too many really to include. But it was really quite intense, and he was messaging me at all hours of the night, and calling multiple times with all of these threats. And I went to the police, of course, because this is quite serious, and they're currently investigating.
Okay, so that leads us to the next chapter, and that is the chapter of how did Polymarket respond?
So Polymarket responded to a query that we sent them, saying that they condemn the harassment that I received and the threats that I received. And then in a follow-up tweet, they posted that they had actually banned the accounts associated with this and reached out to authorities. I'm not really sure how that works because everything's pretty much anonymous on Polymarket. So I don't know who they've banned or what they've done in reality. And the police has not yet updated me yet on any developments yet with the case, but I will say that the harassment and the threats have stopped.
Thank God for that. And since you've told your story, since you've begun to tell your story, what has been the response in terms of Israeli media and elsewhere?
I would say massive support, and also to me that is, but also a lot of people are very horrified by the story, both in Israel and internationally. I've received a lot of messages saying that this is crazy. This is an insane story and can only happen in 2026, where a journalist gets threatened to change their story so that someone could win a bet. It's a very dystopian. It's someone said it's out of a Black Mirror episode. It's really just a crazy situation that we're living in these days. And something that's interesting, and I've been asked by other journalists, and I've spoken to other journalists, and no one's really heard of this kind of thing happening to a journalist before. It's happened in the sports betting world, where athletes are threatened or told to do a certain thing during a game in order for someone to win a bet. That's happened and been reported on plenty, but reporters getting harassed or threatened to change their reporting in order to win a bet, as far as we know, it hasn't been reported before, at least something like that. I may be the first person to go public with this, or I may even be the first person that's received threats like this.
Well, Manny, I always knew you were unique, and now the world knows as well.
Thank you.
Manny, it's such a great story. You wrote it wonderfully. So I fully, really, really recommend that all of our listeners and viewers check out the full version. You left out some of the details in our quick conversation here, and it is just astounding. As you said, it's a Black Mirror episode. It's a Twilight Zone, dating myself. But I think it's just a fantastically written piece of journalism that I wish you didn't have to write. So I'm so glad that you're not receiving threats now. And thank you so much for joining me today, Manny.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Times of Israel's Daily Briefing. Please check out another installment tomorrow. This episode was produced by Ari Schlacht. If you have any questions or comments about this or any other episode, please drop us an email to podcast@timesofisrael.com. Until tomorrow. Shalom.